Our next speaker, actually I was a student in his class. I don't think I did too well, but that's not his fault. He's an awesome prof. That was my own fault. Dr. Oren Amitay, clinical psychologist, university lecturer, and media consultant. His expertise has been shared on every single major TV, radio, and newspaper outlet in Canada on hundreds of issues and stories. He is highly respected in the field and has completed over 424 parenting capacity assessments for various courts and children's aid societies. I can attest to that. I worked at CS for 8 years and I used to read his magnificent reports all the time. And he's been an expert witness for many complex child protection court hearings. He has taught 20 different courses in the field of psychology at several universities, including Ryerson and York Universities. His areas of specialty are clinical psychology, abnormal psychology, psychological behavioral disorders, personality, psychology of human sexuality, gender and positive psychology. He is extremely popular and well-liked by his students and has been voted Instructor of the Year at Ryerson and York University in the same 2005-06 academic year, as well as the semi-finalist for TVO's Best Lecturer competition in 2007 and 2008. He discusses all things psychological on his podcast, The Real Reality, and on his documentary YouTube channel, Dr. Amitay is a very strong free speech supporter, and he has taken on his colleagues in the field who are actively engaged in stifling free speech. Please welcome Dr. Amitay.
Thank you, Sarina. I just got to load it up here. So look, I'm not delusional, and my narcissism is at a healthy level. So I understand that some of you are wondering why this local club act gets to open for Metallica. Audience. So why do I get to play the Jose Carreras to their Placido Domingo and Luciano Pavarotti? Now, the fact that most of you don't know who Jose is, that's just testament to my great metaphor. The fact that you don't know the other two, that's an indictment of our sad state of culture. So three tenors. But in reality, sharing the stage with these, and this is not pandering, so please don't clap because I don't pander, okay? Sharing the stage with these two titans at the vanguard of the fight against opponents of freedom, free speech, critical thinking, science, logic, rational thought, right? It's a challenge because I don't write books. I haven't done some of the things that they've done. I see myself, and Sarina may not have thought it this way, but I see myself as I've got two roles here, as a bridge and as a ringer. And I'll explain those in a second, okay? Now, just as Sarina alluded to, she was a student in my class in psychological disorders, and that was back last year, around this time. And this is when Dr. Peterson's controversy started to make waves. It was around October, November 2016. As soon as that happened, as soon as I saw the backlash he was originally receiving before the media smartened up, I knew that I had to speak up because I knew what he was doing. I knew the concerns he had. I heard them, actually listened to what he had to say. I didn't just read the headlines. So I was able to incorporate what he was saying into my human sexuality class and into my psychological disorders classes. And so Sarina, sitting there in the class with all the other students, were like jaws are dropped, saying like, he's actually speaking truth. He's not being politically correct. And by the way, this speech is going to sound like the most self-indulgent rant for the next few minutes. It's not self-indulgent. I'm framing it this way. It's not self-indulgent because I represent everybody here. This is how I'm the bridge. I may have a media profile, but it wasn't always that way. I don't have the stature of Dr. Peterson or Dr. SAAD or all the people that were up on the screen when Dr. SAAD was talking. Neither does Sarina. But as Dr. SAAD said, an ordinary person can pull off something like this, and I'm a nobody. Yet I've been trying to have an impact. And so I'm trying to act as a bridge saying, you don't have to just look at these two and say, wow, they're doing a great job. I hope they don't get killed. I hope they don't get people thrown at them. Okay. The whole thing that Dr. SAAD was ending on was, what can you do to get engaged? And I'm hoping that by speaking about some of my experiences, that will encourage you, because again, I have no special talents, I've got no special backing, I don't even have tenure. Every time I open my mouth in class, every single time, I risk getting fired. And that's not hyperbole, it's actual truth. Now I'm going to feel bad when I get really self-indulgent. Okay, so I'm going to explain why I do what I do. And Sarina knew from the first time that she met me, or she heard me, she knew I'm into critical thinking. And for me, the fight for free speech is actually secondary to critical thinking, because free speech without critical thinking is at best meaningless and at worst literally deadly. So I have proposed, or I've promulgated the idea of critical thinking in all of my classes. And as Dr. SAAD was talking about that liberal professor, so I'm at one of the most progressive universities in Canada. If you ignore the colonial and genocidal history of its own, the founder, as SJWs always say, every time I say it's progressive, if you ignore that, it's a very progressive university. Yet most of my colleagues are afraid to speak truth. They have to toe the party line. In my human sexuality class, I'm not exaggerating, in the first 10 minutes, I mention bad feminism and good feminism. I mention gender myths, like the gender wage gap. I mention transgender issues, homosexuality, rape, child abuse, domestic violence. This is all within 10 minutes of the very first class. And you know what 2 words I don't say? Trigger warning. I've never used that term, well, sarcastically I do, but I've never used it in my classes. And guess what? Virtually all of my students can make it through the entire term. Why? Because I treat them like adults. I treat them respectfully, but I hit them with really hard issues. Because that's what critical thinkers do. They're able to sit through the discomfort that comes with confronting things that scare you, that make you shameful, that make you embarrassed, that make you angry. That's what a critical thinker does. They sit through it, they tolerate it, and then they're able to analyze the reality. They don't let ideology blind them to what's in front of them. So Sarina, she recognized that in me. And so the first thing she said was, I can get Jordan Peterson to come to your class. I said, yeah, right. Okay? And sure enough, in February of 2017, Dr. Peterson was gracious enough to come to my human sexuality class. How many people have seen the video, the incendiary discussion at Ryerson? All right. Okay. How many saw it on his channel? How many saw it on my channel? Screw you. All right. So, in any event, Sarina, she got Dr. Peterson to come to my lecture. He was gracious enough to do that. And at the same time, I was fighting against, well, first of all, this is the cancel event, and thank you for those who, again, got it canceled. Dr. SAAD already, or Sarina mentioned this, because now we're at the sold-out, not available ticket event because of those no-goodniks. I'm trying to bring that back in fashion, no-goodnik. Use it, it's just such a beautiful term, these no-goodniks out there. And okay. And there's Dr. Peterson doing his talk in my class, which I was honored to have him. After the class, I had to rush off to see some patients. He graciously sat there, or stood there, talked to all these people wanting to talk to him. And the whole point was, I wanted my students to have an opportunity. If they misunderstood what he said, if they took offense or anything like that, they had a chance up front to ask him directly. Don't read the headlines. Form your own opinions based on reality, not what you're being fed. Okay? And at the same time, I was having trouble with my professional, or our professional organization, the Ontario Psychological Association. That's a bunch of psychologists. And it's really sad when a bunch of psychologists who you would think would be trained to be able to tolerate the discomfort that comes with these uncomfortable topics, you think that they'd be able to step back, analyze things, as I was saying earlier. When they were emailing me, okay, I actually facetiously said, are you going to accuse me of mansplaining? Guess what? I got a lot of the you're mansplaining. I got the whole transphobe, etc., etc. You're feeding the troll. These are psychologists. These are my colleagues, and they tried to shut me down. I broke a record. I got banned, I believe, 3 times in 1 month. Huh? All right. I had 3 or 4 threads shut down. You shouldn't be clapping, you should be calling the Ontario Psychological Association and kicking their ass. I got banned, I think, in total 4 times. That's 3 times in 1 month, broke records. And it's just because every time I just put up a recent event, and I try to say, this is what's going on. This is what we are facing in academia, in our professional practice, and we, as psychologists, have to stand up for this. And almost nobody agreed with me publicly. A large number of people agreed with me privately. And when you ask about what can you do, stop emailing people privately and say, I really support what you're doing, great, good for you, I wish I could do that. Unless there's a really good reason not to do it, unless your career's on the line or your life's on the line, when somebody is speaking out, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, or anything else, put your voice out there. Add a comment. So anyway, this is just one more example when they do something bad, other people chimed in. And again, this is what you can do. You can chime in and show support to the people who are standing up and trying to prevent this, or trying to make some good things happen, whether it's Sarina, whether it's Danny, or anybody else, okay? So that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting to support each other. And then finally, State said, oh, well, after much discussion, we realized that some people are going to, they're afraid that people are going to run them over in the parking lot, okay? Again, lies, lies. Did anyone hear of any plot to run you all over, run all over the protesters? No, but they just make up these lies rather than saying, whoops, the tide is turning because enough people have stood up, because enough people have said, this is enough, it's wrong, let people speak, let the truth be heard, we can handle it. Because enough people did it, they backed off, all right? And I called them out on it, as always, okay? So finally, what can you do? I've been making video after video after video, and again, I don't consider myself somebody, I'm a nobody, especially compared to these guys. I'm a nobody, but I've contacted some very important people who are experts in the field. And each person I've contacted is very controversial, whether it's about homosexuality, bisexuality, transgender issues. These are some of the big names, and I'm encouraging discussion where they don't get a voice. Most people don't want them to speak. Dr. SAAD has had some of them on. Dr. Peterson has spoken with a lot of these people. We're trying to promote voices that other people need to hear. You don't have to like it, you don't have to agree with it, but you should hear it and be able to formulate your own opinions. So finally, whether it's these famous people, or whether it's just common folk, including this one woman whose daughter, whose daughter was kind of pushed into an autistic daughter. An autistic daughter at the age of 12 suddenly became trans. She's autistic. And because of the ideology, instead of a doctor saying, well, why did you suddenly at the age of 12, without any indication ever before, why do you suddenly think that you're no longer a girl but a boy? Instead of saying that, that person, that professional, quote-unquote professional, pushed them in the direction of surgery, basically. Okay? Binding breasts, hormone blockers, and surgery's coming next. Double mastectomy. Okay? So this is why we need to speak up. Because if we don't speak up, ideologists win. And what can you do? Well, some of these guys are here today. The bottom left is Andrew. He's been inspired by Dr. Peterson. He has his own website. He has videos. He's trying to work himself, to sort himself out. He's been inspired by Dr. Peterson. It's gratifying to see how many people have been inspired by Dr. Peterson's word. This hateful, terrible, bigot, whatever. When people actually listen to him, they can, you don't need me to tell you this, so I'm going to stop saying it. But the fact is, normal people who have just regular jobs are putting on podcasts. They're interviewing people. They're trying to get the word out, and that's what you can do as well. So get engaged, join the army of the reasonable. Soldiers of reason. Soldiers of reason. Join the soldiers of reason. And thank you for going on, and I apologize if I offended your sensibilities by being self-indulgent. But thank you very much.
After Dr. Peterson finishes speaking, we're just going to take a 5-minute stretch break because I know a lot of you have been standing outside for a long time. He is the second most famous Canadian after Justin Bieber. Way more intelligent than Justin Bieber. Dr. Jordan Peterson, clinical psychologist, professor of psychology, University of Toronto, the author of Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, and his highly anticipated book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos will be released January 2018. He has spoken at Parliament Hill in Ottawa about Bill C-16. His YouTube videos on topics such as mythology, religion, personal responsibility, neo-Marxism, totalitarianism, philosophy, identity politics, free speech have been viewed by millions and millions of people worldwide. He is a personal mentor, and I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Peterson.
Hello. So, I'm really glad to see you all here. It's quite something that you've taken the time to do that. But I don't really say that in a triumphalist way, you know. I mean, we were going to speak to 300 people and we got shut down, and now there's 1,500 people here, and you know, that's a good thing. But it's not a good thing because we had to be here, and that's actually not a good thing. And so, it's not a happy occasion, even though it's a good thing that we can do this. It's a sad thing that we have to do this, I would say. I think it's a sad thing that what's happening to the universities. You know, you may know this, you may not, but yesterday the Faculty Association at the University of Toronto went after me because they went to the administration and put in a major complaint against me. I don't know exactly what the grounds were, but what they said was that, like a couple of months ago, I had talked about making a website that would identify postmodern neo-Marxist courses so that students could be informed about, especially young students, about what philosophical drivers were underlying what they were being so-called taught. I didn't put up the website, actually, because I had some qualms about it. I couldn't tell if it would be more useful as a information provision website, or if it would be more harmful because it would increase political polarization. And so because I couldn't tell, I just put the project on hiatus, and I've been trying to work it out in my mind. I put it up as a Twitter poll yesterday. It's running about 2-to-1 in favor of doing it, but you know, it's not really a random poll, but I was kind of curious about what people would think. Anyways, I'm going to tell you a story. I didn't know what I was going to say to you guys today, except thank you for coming. But luckily, I was provided with this story. A couple of weeks ago, his teaching assistant at Wilfrid Laurier got a hold of me. Her name is Lindsay Shepherd. She showed a video clip of me. It was taken from TV Ontario's The Agenda, which is some of you know, it's a mainstream, very well done mainstream public news affair program. And last year at about this time, I was on there with Theron Meyer and a lawyer from Ottawa whose name I've forgotten, and Nicholas Matt, who is a professor or an adjunct professor of gender studies at the University of Toronto. And he claimed famously that there were no biological differences between men and women, and that was actually the scientific consensus of the last 4 decades. Yeah, well, it's not that funny when that's what people are being taught. And not only, I thought it was pretty ironic that I was in trouble at the University of Toronto for opposing Bill C-16, and he could come out on, public TV and say that the scientific consensus is that there are no biological differences between men and women. I mean, anyways, that's just, we're in the upside down, and so that sort of thing is happening all the time. Anyways, Lindsay Shepherd, who's 22, by the way, graduate student at Wilfrid Laurier in Waterloo, showed her little class a clip from that show. And somebody complained to, we don't know how many people, but at least one person complained. And she was then drawn into I don't know what you'd call it exactly, a tribunal, I guess. And they disciplined her for showing this video, and they told her that I'm reading this from Christine Blatchford's excellent column today in the National Post, yesterday in the National Post. She was informed that merely by showing the clip taken from this televised program I mentioned, that she was legitimizing Peterson's views about genderless pronouns. She's also now been told that she has to submit her lesson plans to her supervisor in advance, that he may sit in on her next few classes, and that she must not show any more controversial videos of this kind. Her supervising professor, whose name I won't mention, this is something to really pay attention to, told her that by showing the video to her Canadian Communication in Context class, it was basically like neutrally playing a speech by Hitler. I don't know what to say about that, really. You know, although I don't find it amusing, and I don't take any pleasure in its satiric irony, you know, because it'd be easy to mock it, you know, but it's too serious to mock. It's not amusing. It's not the least bit amusing. It's so hyperbolic that it actually delegitimizes the horror that people feel for a figure as absolutely reprehensible as Adolf Hitler. You don't use that sort of thing casually. You don't use the name of someone who caused the death of millions of people in the most brutal possible manner as a casual insult to fortify your belief in your ideological purity and your moral virtue. As far as I'm concerned, the only way you can describe that sort of thing is as a sin. It's not acceptable. It's as simple as that. But that wasn't really all that happened to her. She was hauled into a meeting with 3 people. A program coordinator, and that was the program on, it was some sort of diversity thing, and the acting manager of the Gendered Violence Prevention and Support Program. We have a lot of administrators like that now at universities, and that's a very bad thing. I went down to New York University a week ago to talk to Jonathan Haidt, and I'll put that video up on my channel in a week or so. And he took me into one of the bathrooms there, and on the wall there was a poster that said that told people that if they heard any bias, I don't know how you hear that, or if they encountered any bias, that they could report that to the bias reporting team, and they would take, the trained administrative professionals would take appropriate action. So, I can't understand how people can do this. I can't believe they can be so historically ignorant as to make these tribunals in universities and haul people up before them. It's an absolute embarrassment to be associated with universities under these conditions. It's surreal that this is happening. So, they complained or said that she had created a toxic climate. She asked if she was supposed to shelter students from controversial ideas. She's kind of a tough chick, this girl. You know, because there were 3 people on her. She's only 22. It's pretty damn intimidating, you know, when you teach a class and you're doing it for the first time. You're not any older than the students, really. And you're trying to have a discussion about a controversial issue, you know. And the consequence of that is that you get hauled up before 3 people who are much your senior, powerful administrators, your own professor, and told that you have acted unethically and contrary to the spirit of the academic world, and then that you get reprimanded for it and disciplined. That's a big deal. Anyway, she said, "Am I supposed to comfort them?" And then she said that was antithetical to the spirit of the university. No, it was antithetical to the spirit of the university. It's not antithetical to the spirit of the university at all, really, anymore, because the university has, in many ways, lost its spirit, or even polluted its spirit. Shepherd defended herself vigorously, explaining that she had been scrupulously even-handed and had not taken a position herself or endorsed Peterson's remarks before showing the video, and that her students seemed engaged by it and had expressed a wide range of opinions. But then she was told that was part of the problem. So her scrupulous even-handedness, which was not denied, note that, was by presenting the matter neutrally and not condemning Peterson's views as problematic or worse. She was cultivating, quote, a space where those opinions can be nurtured. Now, we should pause for just a second to remember what my opinions were and are. The fact that I made a video about Bill C-16 and the issue of transgendered, and it was an issue that surrounded transgendered people, in some sense was just, I would say, a historical accident, for lack of a better word. The fact that it was about transgendered people was neither here nor there for me. And I think if that's all it would have been about, the entire furor over it would have died down almost instantly. It wasn't about that, and Bill C-16 wasn't about that either. It was part of a much deeper ideological war that is raging in our society in the Western world, and which I think is extraordinarily dangerous, and I think it's happening everywhere. And I think the fact that people know that, or we would not be sitting here, because it wouldn't be important enough otherwise. So I was upset with Bill C-16 because, well, for two reasons. One was that it required compelled speech, and there's no doubt that it does, especially if you read it in the context of the Ontario Human Rights Commission's policy statements, which was the appropriate way to read it according to the federal government themselves before they took down the link to that site. So they actually covered it up. And then the other thing is that it instantiates a social constructionist view of gender into our law. And Gab made some comments about that. He has no idea if what he's teaching is acceptable anymore. I mean, the evolutionary biologist, nothing a bloody evolutionary biologist says is acceptable. I mean, they say things to offend everyone. If you're not offended by evolutionary biology, all that indicates is that you don't understand it. So the people who were punishing the student were regarding her as an avatar of me. They asked her if she was my student. And I guess, was the avatar, or I was the formulator of these horrendous ideas. I'm not sure exactly what they were, because Bill C-16 does require compelled speech, and the surrounding policies do instantiate a social constructionist view of gender into the law. And I had mentioned when I made the video that I was probably breaking the law by making it, and people said that that was an overstatement. But the University of Toronto told me to stop talking about it because I was probably breaking the law. So that seemed to me, it was one of those weird reversals that have been so common in the last year, where a strike against me, so to speak, or against what I was saying, actually was flipped almost immediately into evidence that what I was saying was true. So the two professors seemed suspicious that perhaps Shepherd was a plant of Peterson's, and were alert to any hint. I'm sneaky that way, I actually have secret agents everywhere. And were alert to any hint that she was a closet supporter of the dread alt-right movement that they both mentioned. We've got to the point, I think, where if you're not a supporter of the radical left, then you're far right, which is something that I've been accused of a substantial number of times. It sort of goes along with calling these three Nazis. It's the same sort of thing. I don't believe that because you're opposed to the radical left, that makes you, I don't even think that makes you right-wing. I think at minimum it makes you a centrist. It might even make you a left-winger. I've talked to lots of people who are on the progressive distribution, who are stunned, I would say, that the political spectrum has shifted so far to the left that the left seems to not represent anything they believe in anymore. So, Shepherd protested that this issue was very much up for debate. Her professor chastised her by saying that discussion creates an unsafe learning environment. That's what I was accused of last year and yesterday, creating an unsafe learning environment. No learning environment is safe, by the way. I don't know about you, but every bloody thing in my life I've ever learned is painful. That's exactly I think there are direct neurological reasons for that. It's something like the more important the error that you've made, and so the more correction that you need as a consequence of learning, the more a part of you has to die. That's the part that thought wrongly to begin with. And sometimes you learn something extremely important and extremely fundamental, and half it kills you. It's not like education is what Nietzsche said. A man's spirit can be judged by how much truth he can tolerate. That's exactly right. So the idea that you can have a safe space in educating people is well, it runs contrary to the entire idea of education. Education is no picnic. Most of the things I've learned, especially given what I've studied, which is mostly the history and the psychological history of the horrors of the 20th century. It's like taking one blow to the body after another to study that sort of thing. And unlike Gad, I actually have delivered trigger warnings in my class, although I didn't know that's what they were. I show a video to my students called Crumb, which I would highly recommend. I think it's perhaps the most brilliant documentary ever made, although I haven't seen it for documentary, obviously. But man, I tell you, if you want to know how the mind of a serial killer works, you can watch that. And I would also suggest that you actually don't want to know. And so when I show this in my class, in the section on Freud, I tell students, like, beware. You're going to learn something about psychoanalytic theory from this film that you couldn't really learn other than participating in a really intense sequence of sessions of psychoanalytic therapy, maybe surrounding a terribly traumatic issue, of terrible sexual abuse or something like that, really dark stuff. But the students learn from that. They learn how terrible a family can be, for example, and how twisted and bent things can get. And no one enjoys that. But hopefully they learn something about the depths to which you can descend if you're not awake. So, another one of the people that were re-educating Ms. Shepherd said that the university has a duty to make sure they're not furthering Jordan Peterson. Christy Blatchford says they were oblivious to the fact that they themselves were proving him right by holding the 2017 equivalent of the struggle sessions so beloved in Mao's China. Now, perhaps that was an overstatement. We're not at that point. What happened in Mao's China was perhaps worse than what happened in the Soviet Union, and that's really saying something. But we're playing with the same things. And that's a very, very bad idea. And I do believe, and this is really why the Faculty Association came after me yesterday, under pressure from the Women and Gender Studies Institute, which I have suggested isn't an institute at all, and that it's not, and that those aren't disciplines. And I've said the same thing about the Ontario Institute of the Studies of Education. I think I called it a rat's nest, which is, I'm not withdrawing that. And I think the universities perhaps now do more harm than good, and that's a very terrible thing for an academic like myself to both believe and say. Well, you could draw your own conclusions from what happened at Wilfrid Laurier. You could draw your own conclusions about whether or not showing a video of an argument that I had on Ontario Public Television in a Canadian communication class was basically like neutrally playing a speech like hit by Hitler. You can draw your own conclusions about that. And then you can consider the fact that Ms. Shepherd is now sufficiently disillusioned, she told Post Media Friday, that she is about 70% sure she will be leaving Wilfrid Laurier after this semester is over. So, that's where we're at. And like I said, I really am pleased that you all came out here. It's remarkable that you did. But I'm not in the least bit happy that it's necessary. And I don't think, I mean, it's good that this didn't get shut down, finally, and it's good that there are far more people here than would have otherwise been here. But despite the fact that that's all far better than it could have been, what we're talking about here today is A, nothing to celebrate, and B, nothing to take like the pleasure of victory. And there's no victory here. There's just another set of skirmishes in this battle of ideas that seems to me to be increasingly degenerating into something that we really don't want to see. So I would say, like I generally say in my videos, or try to say, be careful, be awake. If your conscience tells you that it's necessary to say something because you'll otherwise violate your own integrity, then it's time to say something, or to violate your own integrity. And your integrity is really all you have to rely on as you progress through life. That's it. That's really, in the final analysis, that's what you have. And so, you know, the reason that I've said things is because I'm uncontrollably mouthy, and I have been ever since I was 2. And so that's characterological, but it's also because, you know, at some point, remaining silent is more dangerous than saying something. And you can tell when you're at that point because you feel ashamed when you're forced to comply to something, and you do comply, and you feel ashamed afterwards. It's because your conscience is telling you that you violated the integrity of your soul. And Solzhenitsyn, who I talk about a lot, believed that the horrors of communist Soviet Union, and perhaps Mao's China as well, and all the other terrible places where these ideas were instantiated, were a direct consequence of the decision by individuals to violate the integrity of their own souls. And I believe that that was correct. So I would say, don't make unnecessary enemies. Don't say things that are provocative or that you don't have to say. Be careful and awake and friendly and listen. But when push comes to shove and you're asked to comply with something that would make you ashamed to comply with, which you would then have to deny to yourself, then it's time to say something or be complicit in the process.